Sergeant Major, on your feet, all of you." The voice came from the door of the combatives' pit, and nothing in the room moved to obey it, because nothing in the room could move at all. The mats were tan and scuffed, and smelled of chalk and floor wax and old sweat. The cage stood open. 40 candidates ringed the edge of the floor, and every one of them had stopped breathing at the same second, the way a crowd stops when a wire snaps overhead. In the center of the mat, a woman in a plain gray shirt stood over a man who outweighed her by 80 pounds, and the man was not getting up, and a master sergeant with 20 years on his face was standing at the rigid, spine-straight position of attention in front of her, in gym clothes, in front of a guest. Hold there. On the champion's face, on the thing arriving behind his eyes that had not arrived yet. Now go back. 90 minutes, to the morning before any of them knew. The post-combatives facility opened at 0600, and Meredith Kane was standing at the sign-in desk at 0558, with a duffel over one shoulder and no rank anywhere on her body. She wore a gray shirt, worn soft, track pants, trail shoes with the tread going bald at the heel. Nothing on her said anything. That was a choice, though no one in the building would have read it as one. A soldier learns to read people by the things they hang on themselves, the tapes and the tabs and the badges, and a person wearing none of it reads as nothing, reads as civilian, reads as safe. She had spent a long career learning how useful the word safe was when other people applied it to her. The specialist behind the desk slid her the roster and did not look up. Name: Kane. I'm the auditor. He found the line. Guest. Program review. He drew a check mark and pushed a visitor badge across the laminate and went back to his phone. She clipped the badge to her collar, walked to the edge of the mat, and sat. She began to tape her wrists. She did it the way other people button a coat. No wasted motion. A turn, a tuck, a turn. The tape laid flat and even, thumb anchored, the wrap ending clean without a tag she would have to tear. Then her hands were done, and resting on her knees, and she was still. That was the whole of it. Anyone watching would have seen a small woman getting ready to stretch. One man watching saw something else, and did not know why, and could not have said what, and the not knowing settled into him like cold water and stayed. Master Sergeant Gideon Pruitt ran the course, 45 years old, gray coming in at the temples, a nose that had been broken and set twice. He had been teaching combatives for a decade, and running this cadre for 3 years, and he was good, and he knew he was good, and he had learned the thing that the good ones learn, which is how to feel the difference between a person who has trained a long time and a person who has done the thing the training is for. The first kind moves well, the second kind moves early. He looked at the woman taping her wrists at the edge of his mat, and he felt that difference and could not place it, and it bothered him the way a name on the tip of the tongue bothers you, all the way down. He filed it. He had a class to run. 40 candidates, 5 days, a certification at the end of it, and a program review sitting on the roster as a single word, guest, that he had not thought about twice. At the far end of the mat, Staff Sergeant Dax Renner was warming the room up. Renner was 27 and built like a wedge, and he was the reigning post champion, and everyone in the pit knew it because he made sure of it. He rolled his shoulders. He clapped a candidate on the back hard enough to move him a step. He walked the ring the way a man walks a room he owns, calling soldiers by name, throwing a jab-hook combination at the air to loosen up. And the candidates laughed at what he said, because he was the best fighter most of them had ever stood next to, and laughter is what you spend on a man like that. He was not a bad soldier. That was the part people forgot when they told the story later. He was a very good one who had never once been beaten in this building, and had built a whole way of standing on that fact, and a man who has never been beaten does not know the shape of the thing he does not know. He clocked the auditor early, small, older, civilian clothes. A clipboard, he decided, which is what he called anyone from a headquarters who came to watch and grade and leave. He let it sit for 20 minutes while he drilled the cadre through breakfalls and guard passes, and then, because the room was warm and the candidates were his, and a champion likes an audience, he turned it into a joke. "Come on, ma'am," he said it across the whole floor so all of them heard. "Step up, let's give the guest a turn." He spread his hands, playing to the ring, and the ring gave him the grin he wanted. "Real gentle, I promise." The candidates laughed. Meredith Kane stood. She did not answer him. She peeled the visitor badge off her collar and set it on top of her duffel, the way you set down a thing you will want again later. And she walked to the center of the mat, unhurried, and she rolled her shoulders once, and she set her stance. Weight back, hands low, chin down. And to every soldier ringing that floor, it looked like a small woman who was afraid. Pruitt looked at the stance, and the cold water went up to his chest, because it was not a nervous stance. A nervous person carries their weight forward, toward the threat, leaning into the thing they are scared of. Her weight was back and settled, and her hands hung where hands hang when a person has decided not to reach for anything until there is a reason. It was the stance of someone with nothing to prove and nowhere to be, and Pruitt had seen it exactly once before, a long time ago, in a place he could not yet remember, and it had frightened him then, too. The match started the way Renner started everything, which was forward. He came off the line hard, feinted a jab to move her hands, and dropped his level for the double leg he had ended 100 rounds with in this building. It was a good shot. It was fast, and it was low, and it was the shot that won him the post title, and it found nothing, because half a second before he committed, Kane was already gone. A short sprawl, hips dropping back, one hand riding the back of his neck to steer his head into the mat, so that his beautiful takedown closed on empty air and a fistful of vinyl. The room did not notice. The room saw the small woman stumble backward and the champion drive in, and the room cheered. Pruitt noticed. Pruitt had stopped watching the score. She had not sprawled when Renner shot. She had sprawled when Renner decided to shoot, 3 movements early, off a tell in his hips that Renner himself did not know he had. A small load of the back leg, a drop of the near shoulder, a thing that happened a full beat before the level change, and that no opponent in this building had ever punished, because no opponent in this building had ever seen it. That was not a reaction. A reaction is late by definition. That was a read. You did not read a level change like that unless you had watched 10,000 of them and taught 1,000 more, unless the movement of another person's weight had stopped being something you saw and become something you simply knew. The way you know a word is coming before a friend finishes the sentence. Twice more in the first minute he shot, and twice more he found her already gone. Not far, never far. An economy of movement so small it barely registered as movement at all. A few inches of hip, a redirection of his own weight, the exact minimum required and not 1 inch more. A lesser defender sprawls big, scrambling, spending energy. She spent almost nothing. Every time Renner committed, she was simply somewhere his commitment did not reach, and she got there so early and so plainly that it stopped looking like defense and started looking like a woman stepping out of the way of a door she had watched a man wind up to open. Pruitt had taught the sprawl for a decade. He had never seen it done as an afterthought. You could not teach a soldier to do it as an afterthought. You could only wait 20 years for the 10,000th repetition to burn the thinking out of it. And here was a woman for whom the thinking was long gone, and Pruitt felt the years of it come off her like heat off a road. Kane gave the position back. That was the second thing, and it was stranger than the first. She let Renner recover. She let him work back to his feet, let him get into a collar tie, and when he muscled her down to the mat, she went down. A takedown she could have denied 3 different ways, and Pruitt watched all 3 of them get offered by Renner's clumsy pressure and get declined by her, one after another, like a woman waving away 3 cups of coffee. She landed soft, a clean breakfall, chin tucked, and she gave up a control she had no reason to give up. And the ring roared for the champion putting the clipboard on her back, and under the noise, Master Sergeant Pruitt leaned to the cadre instructor beside him and said the only thing he was sure of. "Watch her hands," he said, "not the score." Because the hands never hurried. Whatever the rest of her did, stumble, give ground, get put on her back to a room full of laughter, the hands stayed calm and exact and early, framing, checking, controlling distance in inches. And every time Renner reset to circle her, she reset with him. And the resets came at the same interval. 4 seconds. He counted 2 of them, and then a third. And they were all 4 seconds. Metronome even. A pace she was setting, and he was following, and did not know he was following. He had seen those resets before. He was sure of it now, and still could not find the room. Years ago. A classroom. A cadre he had been too junior to understand. A woman walking the mats, correcting hips, saying a thing he had never forgotten and had never been able to attach to a face. You do not win the fight in the fight. You win it in the 4 seconds between. He had built a decade of teaching on that sentence and had lost the mouth it came out of. Kane gave Renner the round on points. She simply stopped denying him. She let him accumulate the control the scoring rewarded and stepped back at the buzzer with her hands loose at her sides, and the champion threw both arms up, and the ring gave him his victory. And Gideon Pruitt went cold all the way through, because he understood at last that winning had never once been the thing she was doing out there. She had spent the round reading Renner the way a mechanic spends a test drive reading an engine. She had spent it learning him, his tells, his timing, his tempo, the flare in his elbow when he shot, the way his weight committed a beat before his hands did. And she had let the whole room watch her lose so that not one of them would understand what they had actually just seen. The cadre instructor beside Pruitt did not understand either. He watched the buzzer and the raised arms and the small woman stepping back, and he grinned and said, "She's game, I'll give her that." Pruitt did not answer. He was looking at Kane's hands, which had already stopped being fists, which had gone loose and easy at her sides the instant the round ended. No adrenaline shake in them. No wringing out of the fight. Nothing. A person who has been in a real fight comes off it with hands that will not stop moving for a minute or two. Her hands had come off it like a woman setting down a coffee cup. That was the tell that finally frightened Pruitt, more than the reads or the resets, because it meant that whatever had just happened on that mat, no part of her had considered it a fight at all. Renner was warm now, and a champion who has been handed a win in front of his cadre is a dangerous kind of generous. He decided to be funny about it. "The guest put up a fight," he announced, walking the ring. He was grinning. "I'll give her that." He looked her up and down, the gray shirt, the taped wrists, the stillness that he read as nothing. "What are you, ma'am? A $1.20 soaking wet?" The ring laughed. "A $1.20 soaking wet, gentlemen." He spread his arms, delighted with himself. "Be gentle." It caught. That is how a room like that works. A champion hands them a name, and the name is permission. And within a minute the cadre had it. The $1.20. A candidate 2 rows back mimicked her stance, hands low, chin down, exaggerated small, and the men around him lost it. Another repeated the nickname to the man beside him, and they both laughed at the size of the joke. Kane watched the mimic without heat. She adjusted a wrap of tape that did not need adjusting, thumb smoothing the end flat, and she reset, and she said nothing at all. Specialist Miles Ackerman laughed with the rest of them. He was 22 and new, and he laughed because everyone laughed. And then the auditor turned her head and met his eyes. Not hard, not angry, just direct. The way an adult looks at a child who has said a thing the child does not yet understand. And the laugh died in his throat, and he could not have told you why. He looked at his boots. He did not laugh again. Something in the way she had looked at him had not been offended. That was the part that stayed with him. She had looked at him like a person who already knew how the morning was going to end, and was a little sorry he was going to be in it. Pruitt tried to end it there. He clapped his hands, called the time, moved to break the cadre toward the next station on the schedule. He wanted the woman off the mat and the session closed, and the cold water out of his chest. But Renner was rolling, and the room was his, and he talked right over the master sergeant, easy, without even seeming to notice he was doing it. "One more," Renner said. "One more round, for the guest." He clapped his hands together, and the sound cracked across the pit. And Meredith Kane, for the first time all morning, almost smiled. If a story has ever made you sit forward before you knew why, do that now, and take the second it costs to subscribe to Honor Tales, because the part that matters hasn't happened yet. Renner made the next round a lesson. That was how he framed it, loud for the cadre, because a champion teaches, and the auditor had become his teaching aid. "Full intensity this time," he said. "So, the guest sees how it's really done. No offense, ma'am. You'll want the real thing for your report." Kane nodded. She agreed to it with a single dip of her chin, mild as a woman agreeing to another cup of coffee, and began, again, to tape. Pruitt stepped in. "That's not a graded event, Staff Sergeant. Bring the intensity down. We spar to standard in my pit, not to a crowd." "It's fine, Gunny." Renner did not even look at him. In the Army, the word was sergeant, not Gunny. But Renner had picked it up somewhere and used it on everyone senior to him and made it sound like a pat on the head. She agreed. "Didn't you, ma'am?" She was taping, under her breath, so low that only the man closest to her caught it. She named what she was going to do. She named it by the syllabus term, not the gym word, not the slang the cadre used, but the exact phrase from the standard, the one printed in the field manual and taught in the master trainer course and drilled into every certified instructor in the Army. High mount, trap, and roll. Her voice was flat and instructional, a woman reading a page she had read 1,000 times, and there was no menace in it at all, which was the most frightening thing about it. Pruitt was the man closest to her. His face changed, not by much, a tightening at the eyes, a stillness that came into his shoulders. Because a person who has merely trained combatives says the gym words, mount, roll, the shorthand everyone uses on the mat. A person who has taught the course says the standard. And only one kind of person says the standard the way she said it, without effort, without pride, without any of the small emphasis a person puts on a phrase they had to memorize, the way you say a thing you wrote. He almost had it then. The classroom, the woman correcting hips, the 4 seconds, the sentence he had built a career on. It was all there, and it would not resolve into a name. And the harder he reached, the faster it slid. And the round was starting. And Renner was already up on the balls of his feet. The candidates ringed tighter. This was the good part, the champion at full go, and they packed the edge of the mat to see it. Phones half raised without quite coming up. The whole room was against her now. The nickname, the laughter, the certainty. 40 men leaning in to watch a small woman get taught a lesson she had asked for. It was exactly the position she wanted. and Pruitt understood that too. A half-second, too late to matter. A person does not agree to a thing like this unless the thing like this is the plan. She had let them build the whole trap around her, and had only had to stand inside it and wait. He crossed to the timekeeper, a young corporal with a whistle around his neck, and told him quietly not to start the clock. The corporal blinked at him. "Master Sergeant," he began, and reached for the whistle out of pure habit, and Renner was already across the mat. Pruitt caught Renner by the arm before the round could close. It was the last thing he could do that would still look like a coach and not a confession. "Ease off," he said. Low, fast, just for the two of them. "You don't know who she is." Renner laughed. He actually laughed, glancing back at the woman resetting her tape at the center of the mat, small and gray and quiet. "She's a clipboard, Gunny? Relax." He rolled his shoulder loose under Pruitt's hand. "I'll go easy. Scout's honor." Pruitt let him go and crossed to the sign-in desk instead, fast, and turned the roster around. He ran his finger down the visitor line to the word that had meant nothing to him at 0600. Guest, program review, and a name he had walked past without reading. Kane. He looked at it, and the 15-year-old memory finally cracked open the rest of the way. A mat in another building, his own hips being corrected by a set of small, exact hands, a woman's voice, flat and patient, telling a cadre of young sergeants that the fight was already over by the time it started, if they had done the 4 seconds right. He had spent a decade quoting a ghost. The ghost had signed his roster that morning in bald tread shoes and let his best fighter call her a $120. And Pruitt understood, standing at the desk with his finger on her name, that there was nothing left he could do to stop what was about to happen, because it had already started, and it had started the moment she sat down, and he stepped back onto the mat, grinning, and Master Sergeant Gideon Pruitt stopped breathing, because he had run out of ways to stop this without saying the thing he was not yet certain enough to say, and the woman at the center of the floor was already watching Renner's hips, already breathing at that 4-second interval, already exactly where she had been trying to get since the moment she sat down at that desk in bald tread shoes and let a whole building decide she was nothing. If you have ever watched someone underestimate the wrong person and known in your gut what was coming, stay in this room. Subscribe and see it land, because this is the 4 seconds she has been building all morning. The room held its breath on the edge of the round, and here is what none of them knew. 19 years before, in a country that would take years to stop being in the news, Meredith Kane was 28 years old, and she was a ranger, and she was inside a stairwell that had come down. The building had taken a hit and folded, one of those failures that happens faster than the mind can accept, and a team was pinned in the collapse. Men under slabs, men in a space that had gone from a stairwell to a crush of concrete and rebar and dust in the length of one breath. No weapon solved this. Nothing you could shoot fixed a man wedged under 100 weight of failed building. It came down to hands. It came down to leverage and angle, and the small, exact, unglamorous knowledge of how a human body moves, and how much of a load a human body can shift, and for how long, and Meredith Kane had that knowledge the way other people have a first language. She cleared it, hold by hold. She got a shoulder under, and a hip in, and moved a slab an inch, then another inch, then enough, and pulled a man through the gap, and went back. She did it in the dark, with dust filling her mouth and her eyes burning, and she did the math 1,000 combatives rounds had drilled into her, without ever telling her it was drilling her. Where the weight wanted to go, how to make a small frame do more than its size, by putting every ounce of it exactly where the leverage was. How to buy 4 seconds when 4 seconds was the whole of the difference between a man coming out and a man staying in. She carried a 200-pound Ranger up 9 steps that would not hold, one arm across his chest and her hips under his weight, and her breath timed to the give of the concrete. The Buck 20 did that. Twice. Corporal Owen Brandt held the withdrawal. He was 24. He kept the gap open while she moved the others, took the load when the load had to be taken so the last man could pass, and when the rest of the stairwell came down, it came down on the last man in. And the last man in was the man holding the gap open, and that was Brandt, and he did not come out. She had gone back for him. That was the part that did not make it into any report. When the last of the stairwell came down, she had turned around and started digging into it with her bare hands, and it had taken 2 of the men she had just carried out to pull her off the rubble, and she had not spoken for the rest of that night. There is a specific arithmetic that lives in a person after a thing like that. 3 out, 1 in. The math never resolves. It does not get better with time, and it does not get worse. It simply becomes the floor you stand on for the rest of your life, and you learn to stand on it, and you decide what you are going to build there. She had carried 3 men up a broken stairwell with her hands. She had left 1 behind. Everything she taught afterward was an argument with that stairwell. She could have stayed in the regiment. They wanted her to. A soldier who does what she had done in that stairwell does not get let go easily. But she had done the arithmetic and come out the other side of it with a single hard conclusion, which was that her own hands, as good as they were, had not been the thing that saved those men. The training had. The 10,000 repetitions had. The 4 seconds she had bought in the dark had been bought years earlier, on mats, by instructors whose names she had mostly forgotten. And if that was true, if the thing that saved a pinned team was not a hero, but a curriculum, then the highest leverage place a person with her hands could stand was not on the next objective. It was in the schoolhouse, making 10,000 other pairs of hands better, so that the next stairwell in the next country would give up all 4 of its men instead of 3. That was the year she started rooting toward the schoolhouse. Not because she could not fight anymore, because she could, better than almost anyone alive, and it had not been enough. And she had decided, standing in the dust with her hands torn open and Brandt's name already a stone in her chest, that the thing she was going to do with the rest of her career was make sure the next team's hands were better than hers had needed to be. She went to the combatives school. She helped write the master trainer standard, the level 4 curriculum. The pages the cadre in this pit were being tested on this very week. She wrote the trap and roll the way it was printed. She wrote the 4 seconds in language a 19-year-old could learn, and a 45-year-old would never forget. She had taught a young student named Gideon Pruitt in one of those first cadres, corrected his hips on a mat 15 years gone, told him, "You win it in the 4 seconds between," and moved on to the next soldier without ever knowing his name would matter, without ever imagining she would stand in his pit 2 decades later while he tried and failed to remember her face. The curriculum was Owen Brandt's memorial. Not a wall, not a plaque, not a name read once a year. A living thing. Every soldier who came off that mat with better hands than they walked on with was a step in a stairwell that would hold next time. That was the whole of what she did now, and it was the only monument she had ever wanted. Back in the present, on the tan mat, under the lights, in front of 40 men who had decided she was a buck. 20 soaking wet, Meredith Kane exhaled once, slow, and the 4-second interval reset one last time. Renner went full intensity, and he was reckless with it. He came in with everything, a champion showing a headquarters clipboard how it was really done, and he threw a slam he had no business throwing at an auditor in a training session. A hard, committed takedown meant to put her down and keep her there and make the point in front of his cadre, the kind of throw that ends careers on a bad landing. It was unsafe. Pruitt would write that word in a report later. Unsafe, and it would be the true word for it. It was the line, the bright one, the one every instructor in that building knew and taught, and Renner ran straight across it with a grin on his face. Kane led him. She took the slam. She did not deny it, did not scramble, did not do any of the three things Pruitt watched her decline for the third time that morning. She rolled with it, absorbed the force, went where it wanted to send her, chin tucked, spine rounded, a breakfall so clean it made no sound, and she let Dax Renner climb up into the high mount he wanted, the dominant position, the champion on top, knees pinning, the $120 flat on her back with the whole room packed around the mat to watch the lesson finish. From underneath him, flat on her back with 200 pounds of post-champion settling onto her chest, she smiled. Not warm. The way a door smiles when it finally opens. Pruitt saw the smile and the room fell out from under him, because he knew the smile, he knew the page. He had been on the bottom of exactly this on a mat 15 years ago, with an instructor's weight on his chest and her voice in his ear, saying, "Now you are exactly where I want you." And he knew what came next, the way you know the last line of a prayer you learned as a child. "That's the page," he said under his breath. No one heard him. No one was listening to anyone but the champion. Kane trapped the arm. She caught Renner's wrist and pinned it flat to his own chest so he could not post with it, and she hooked his ankle with her foot so he could not step out and base, the trap and roll exactly as it was printed in the standard she had written, every checkpoint in place, nothing rushed. And then she bridged, hips driving up and over, the small, precise engine of her that had moved a slab of concrete in the dark. All of that, 120 pounds arriving in one place, at one instant, with the leverage set perfectly beneath it. And Dax Renner, undefeated in this building, weightless for a quarter of a second, went over. One move in. He went over and came down on his back, and her weight arrived on top of him, settled and inevitable and controlled, his own trapped arm folded across him, her base low and wide and immovable, her weight distributed the way the standard said to distribute it, so that a man twice her size could not create the space to breathe, let alone escape. And the champion, who had never been beaten in this pit, understood in the space of a single heartbeat that he was not going anywhere and could do nothing about it. And the pit understood it a half-second behind him, and the noise died all at once, like a hand had come down on a radio. Renner tried to move. That was the part he would think about for years afterward, lying awake. Not the losing, but the trying. He was strong. He was the strongest man in that building, and he had never in his life met a position he could not power out of if he wanted it badly enough. And he wanted it now more than he had ever wanted anything, with 40 of his own soldiers watching. He drove his hips. He tried to bridge her off. He tried to shrimp, to frame, to make the inch of space that every escape starts from. And there was no inch, because the weight on him was not fighting his strength at all. It was simply everywhere his strength wanted to go, arriving there first, sitting exactly on the leverage, turning every ounce he spent into nothing. He had felt heavy men before. This was not heavy. This was 120 pounds placed so precisely that it might as well have been the floor. He stopped moving. It was the smartest thing he did all morning, and he did not know yet that she had been waiting for him to figure out that stillness was all he had left. Around the mat, the understanding came in stages. The front row saw it first, the candidates close enough to see that the champion was not resting, that the champion was pinned, that the small woman on top of him was not straining. Then the second row, reading it off the first. Then the whole ring, 40 men recalculating the entire morning in the length of a held breath. The sprawl, the resets, the round she handed away. And arriving all together at a total none of them had the rank or the years to name yet. Master Sergeant Gideon Pruitt stepped onto the mat, "Stop," he said. "Match." And then, in front of 40 candidates, in front of the reigning post champion, in front of a woman in a gray gym shirt with tape on her wrists and bald tread on her shoes, Master Sergeant Pruitt came to the position of attention, heels together, spine straight, chin level, eyes front. The candidates did not understand. They stood at the edge of the mat and stared at their senior instructor standing rigid in front of the clipboard, and confusion moved through the ring like a draft under a door. Kane released Renner clean. No flourish, no final squeeze, no last half-second of control to make a point. Just off him and up onto her feet in one economical motion, the way she did everything. And then she stood and did nothing, retaped nothing, adjusted nothing, brushed nothing off, and the stillness of her was suddenly the loudest thing in the building. The door opened. Colonel Warren Loomis was 49 years old, and he wore the garrison on his shoulders, and he had crossed half the post at speed because a call had told him who had signed the roster that morning as a guest. He stopped just inside the pit and took in the scene in one pass. The master sergeant at the position of attention, the champion getting up off his back, the small woman standing quiet at the center of the mat with tape on her wrists. And he did the only thing there was to do. "Sergeant Major Kane," he said, "we didn't expect you on the mat." The pit went silent in a way it had not been silent all morning. This was not the silence of a held breath. This was the silence of 40 soldiers rerunning the last 90 minutes behind their eyes and getting a different answer to every single frame of it. "Sergeant Major." Dax Renner's face began to move. Confusion first, the word not fitting the woman, the two things refusing to be the same thing. Sergeant Major and Buck 20 and clipboard and guest all trying to occupy the same body and failing. Then disbelief, a small shake of the head. No, and a glance around the ring as if one of his cadre would tell him it was a joke. Then the recognition, arriving the way cold water arrives, all at once and everywhere. Every piece of the morning coming back rewritten. The sprawl 3 moves early. The 4-second resets. The position given up on purpose. The syllabus term named under her breath. The round handed to him like a coin to a child. The trap and roll done to him clean and unhurried and undeniable. Done to him by the woman who wrote the trap and roll. And behind the recognition, last, the drop. The thing that had been arriving behind his eyes in the very first frame of this story, before you knew what you were looking at, the understanding of exactly what he had done, and exactly who he had done it to, and exactly how many people had watched him do it. Specialist Miles Ackerman was the first candidate to come to attention. He did not wait to be told. He snapped to it at the edge of the mat, heels together, eyes front. The 22-year-old who had stopped laughing an hour before because a woman had looked at him, and he had felt something true come off her. The candidate next to him saw it and followed, and the one next to him, and it went down the ring like a wave breaking along a seawall. 40 soldiers coming to the position of attention one after another, in front of a woman they had spent the morning calling a Buck 20 soaking wet. It was not the order that did it. No one had called the room to attention. It was the sight of Master Sergeant Pruitt, a man every candidate in that pit had spent a week being a little afraid of, the hardest grader in the building, the instructor who did not hand out approval, standing rigid and reverent in front of a small woman in a gray shirt. If Pruitt stood like that for her, then the arithmetic was finished, and every soldier in the room did the only correct thing a soldier can do when the arithmetic is finished, which is to stand up straight and put his eyes to the front and stop being a boy who had been laughing a minute ago. The phones came down. The grins were gone as if they had never been. Colonel Loomis let the silence hold, because a colonel knows when a room is teaching itself something no order could teach it faster. Pruitt, still rigid, spoke without turning his head. "She wrote the course you're testing on, Staff Sergeant," he said quietly. "She corrected my hips 15 years ago on a mat just like this one. I've been trying to place her since she walked in." He let a breath go. "You do not win the fight in the fight. You win it in the 4 seconds between. She taught me that sentence. I've been teaching it to you all week." Renner came to the position of attention last and slowest, and every candidate in the pit saw him do it. It could have ended in a formation, and it did not, because that was not what she had come for. Colonel Loomis offered it, quietly off to the side. While the cadre stood in a silence nobody wanted to be the first to break, he offered to make it formal, to call the post together, to put on the record what had happened in that pit, to let the institution do the thing the institution does when one of its own has been disrespected in front of a crowd. He had the authority and the will, and it would have been just, and Renner would have deserved every minute of it. Kane declined. "Recognition's noted, sir," she said. "I've got a course to grade before I fly out. Let's not turn it into a parade." Her voice was the same flat instructional voice she had named the technique in. There was no triumph in it anywhere. A parade was a thing you threw when the point was the win. The win had never been the point. Loomis studied her for a moment. He was a colonel. He had spent a career learning to read the space between what a soldier said and what a soldier wanted, and he could see that she meant it, and that the meaning went deeper than modesty. "Most people would want the record straight, Sergeant Major," he said quietly, in front of the same crowd that watched it go crooked. "The record's for them, sir, not for me." She glanced once at the ring of candidates, still at attention, 40 young faces that had rearranged themselves in the space of 90 seconds. They just watched it. They'll carry it further than a formation would. You put me on a stage, and it becomes a story about me. Leave it here, and it becomes a thing every one of them checks himself against for the rest of his career. She picked the visitor badge back up off her duffel and clipped it to her collar, the small punctuation of a woman returning to the job she had actually come to do. "Let it stay theirs." Loomis looked at her a beat longer, then nodded, because there was nothing to add to it, and because he had just been taught something too. There would be no arrest, no charge sheet, no investigation opened with a flourish, no boot on the champion's neck for the cadre to remember instead of the lesson. She had not come to break Dax Renner. She had come to review a program, and the review still needed writing, and a career had taught her the difference between a lesson and a punishment, and how rarely the loud one was the useful one. She took Renner back onto the mat. For 90 seconds, in front of the cadre, she did the only thing that would matter a year from now. She did not humiliate him. She taught him. She had him show her the level change, the good one, the one that won him the post title. And she watched it twice, and she found the one habit buried in it that would, someday, in a real place and not a pit, get a soldier hurt. "Keep your elbow in," she told him. Flat, instructional, the same voice. "You flare it when you shoot. In here it costs you a point. Out there it costs you the arm, and then it costs you the man behind you." She reset his elbow with 2 fingers, tucked it against his ribs, walked him slowly through the shot with it tucked, so his body could learn the shape of it right. In. Every time. Next time it might not be a course, it might be a doorway. Renner held still and listened. Something in his face had come loose and rearranged, and what settled in its place was not shame anymore. It was the thing a good soldier feels when a better one takes the trouble to fix him instead of finishing him. A kind of hard gratitude with no comfortable place to put itself. He would be a different instructor after this. Every cadre he ran for the next 15 years would carry the 90 seconds she spent not destroying him, and none of those soldiers would ever know why their instructor was so careful to teach the man in front of him instead of the crowd around him. Miles Ackerman stepped up when she rose, nervous, and asked the right question. He asked how she had known Renner was going to shoot before Renner did. "You weren't watching his face," she said. "Neither was I. Nobody's face tells the truth. It's the last thing to move and the first thing they learn to control. The hips tell you first. The weight tells you. Watch the part of a man that can't lie to you." She looked at the young specialist for a moment, the one who had stopped laughing on his own before he had any reason to. "You'll be good," she said. "You already stopped laughing before you knew why. That's most of it. The rest is just repetitions. If you have made it this far, into the quiet after the noise, this is the part the channel is really about, the moment after the win, and it costs you nothing to subscribe to Honor Tales, so the next one finds you." Renner found her at the water station afterward, while the cadre reset the mats. He did not know what to do with his hands. He was a man who had spent 10 years being certain of exactly where his hands went, and now he stood in front of the woman who had folded him in one move and could not find them. He started to apologize. She stopped him before it could become a speech. "Don't," she said. "An apology is for you, not for me. You want to make it right. You teach it right. That's the only version that means anything." She capped her water bottle. "You're a good fighter, Staff Sergeant. That was never the problem. The problem is, you thought good was the same as done. It isn't. The day you decide you're done is the day you start getting the soldiers behind you hurt. Stay hungry, and you'll be an instructor worth the tab. I've seen worse start slower." It was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to him, and it did not feel kind at all, and he understood, dimly, that those were often the same thing. Gideon Pruitt walked her out toward the parking lot when the session broke. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then he told her he had been quoting her for 15 years, without a face to put on the sentence, and she said she was glad the sentence had traveled, and that a thing you teach right does not need your name on it to keep working. That was the whole of what she wanted, she said, not to be remembered, to be right about the 4 seconds, forever, in rooms she would never stand in the hands of soldiers she would never meet. She graded the course honestly. She wrote the program up the way she had come to write it up, the strong parts and the weak parts named plainly, unbent by anything that had happened on the mat, because a woman who declines a parade also declines to let a good morning inflate a grade. Pruitt's instruction earned the marks it earned. The safety lapse earned the note it earned. She wrote both, and she signed it. Before first light the next morning, before the cadre formed up, she left the signed evaluation on Gideon Pruitt's desk. She set it square in the center of the blotter, where he could not miss it. On top of it, she left a note, folded once, 4 words in a small, even hand. She was in her room by 2100, the duffel open on the bed, folding the gray shirt and the track pants back into it. She had lived out of a bag like this for 26 years, and the folding was its own kind of prayer, a thing the hands did while the rest of her went quiet. On the small desk lay the evaluation, finished, and beside it the 4-word note she would carry over to the schoolhouse before dawn. She read the evaluation through one more time, the way she read everything and changed nothing, and set it square. Her phone had lit while she packed. A message, short, a coded greeting she had not heard in a while, from a name that no longer existed on any current roster, and a place name that wasn't on any tourist map. 4 words and a location. A next mat in a next country, where a next program needed a quiet auditor. Nobody would know to fear, where another building full of good young soldiers needed their hands made better before the day came that their hands were all they had. She read it once. She did not answer it. She was already packing, and the answer to a message like that was not words. The answer was to show up, in bald tread shoes with no rank on her body, and to sit down at the edge of a mat and wait for someone to decide she was nothing. The pit was empty by dawn. The mats were swept, the cage latched, the lights off, the tape she had used folded once and dropped in the bin by the door. When the cadre formed up an hour later, Renner was already on the mat, alone, drilling a level change with his elbow tucked in, over and over. Slow, the way a man practices a thing he has decided to be right about for the rest of his life. He did not know she was gone yet. He would find out the way everyone found out, from Pruitt, and he would go still for a moment, and then go back to his repetitions, because that was the only thing left that meant anything, and she had known it would be. On Master Sergeant Pruitt's desk, the evaluation lay signed and square, and the note on top of it read only, "Better hands." MC. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.